Hello there, and welcome to the Grumpy Sound Guy Show. I am your Grumpy Sound Guy, Mr. J.R. Everhart from COP Audio and Staging. Hey, listen, tonight we have they have the M32 out. We're not going to necessarily dig specifically into a whole bunch of stuff on that. We just finished a members-only video where we went very in-depth through my start scene and how I build a mix and that sort of thing. If you're not a member of the channel, for about the price of a cup of coffee, you can be a member of the channel. There's a whole promo for that coming your way in about 60 seconds. Join, and then you kind of get some of that in-depth stuff. But tonight, I wanted to really talk about compression and EQing and some of that stuff. We talked a lot about not mixing ourselves into a hole. I think on the member side about a week or so ago. We're going to touch on some of those things. It was something we had in the shorts, on Facebook and across TikTok and YouTube. So tonight we're going to kind of get a lot of questions about compression. So we're just going to have a very brief general conversation about compression and how I approach it and how I execute compression in the middle market live music scene. So stick around. I'll be right back. Hey guys, if I could just have a moment of your time to talk to you about this channel. 49.8% of you guys watching this right now is not subscribed to this channel. Will you please hit that subscription button? It doesn't cost anything to subscribe to the channel on the public side here. And then that gives us tools and resources and for my marketing team to be able to do what we need to do to get this content out to people who really enjoy this sort of thing. The other thing is, if you're super digging this and you'd like a deeper look into my world, then subscribe to the paid side of the YouTube channel. You can join for about the cost of a cup of coffee a month, and then I do vlogs over there. I post content that never goes public, and I let you into my world. I let you into the COP audio world, and I let you see what our day-to-day life looks like. Love you guys. Thank you for the support. Welcome back. Welcome back. I know that was a lot of promo stuff. It was about 2 minutes. Some of you guys freak out like, 23 minutes into the video and you're just getting to your point. Well, dude, then start your own YouTube channel, okay? Show me just how good you are at this, all right? Because I'm just me, dude, and I like to talk and I like to be very thorough, and I view you people as my friends, and and I love my followers, which I guess I've been wanting to, and this is going to tick off all the people that just want me to get to the compression conversation, but this needs to be said, okay? And I've said this before, and I'm going to put up a short at some point this week conveying this. All my contact information is all over the internet. I'm running a business, so it's not hard to get my phone number, But if you want to call me and just kind of sit and talk shop, I don't really have time for that, okay? Or if you want to call me to talk about something and ask me questions that I have already answered in a short video or something like that you're referring to in your voicemail, and I don't call you back, I'm not being rude. I love you. Thank you for your support. Please keep coming back. If you keep coming back, you'll find the answers to your questions. I mean, I have over 600 and some videos posted, So, there's plenty of archive stuff that you can go to and you can find answers to your questions. I am trying to run a business here, okay? I am trying to manage my own personal life. COP Audios, we are in peak season right now, and things are well underway, and it's everything I can do to keep my head above water doing those things. I don't have a lot of time to sit around and lay on the phone with people who just want to talk shop. If you want to come see me at a gig and come see me after sound check when I have a little bit of downtime, we can talk shop all you want, man. I'm all about it, I'm not hard to find. I usually, most weeks on Thursday or Friday, I will post where I'm going to be for the weekend. Most of my followers know where I typically am, especially with events like the Orioles thing, which I'm at almost every other weekend. I'm at Camden Yards. Come down and see me, man. Let's talk, let's chat. We can chew the fat. But if you're trying to get my personal attention and I don't respond, please don't take that personally. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not some stuck-up jerk. I'm just a blue-collar guy. I mean, dude, look at my shop. It's a mess. If that doesn't communicate I'm one of you, nothing does, all right? But I have my own priorities in my own life. And I get these phone calls from strange people all over the world. I've had them from Canada. I've had them from West Coast. A guy from New York the other day called me. I get them from Ireland, believe it or not. And then you guys that blow up my inbox on like Friday and Saturday night, why are you not out working? Like, what's going on, dude? Why are you not out like making money? Like, you should be busy on Friday and Saturday night. I am. And then it never fails. I guess you guys are sitting around at home, tired of watching, Simpsons reruns, and you get on your phone and you blow me up. And sometimes I get 4 or 5 guys at a time, who want, my opinion on 25 different pieces of equipment and stuff. There's no way I can get to all that. Okay. And it's not that I don't want to. I genuinely try. If you send me private messages, I genuinely try when I have some downtime to answer some of that stuff. But I can't get to everything. The Grumpy Sound Guy has just grown way, way beyond what I thought it would ever be. And you guys are so super supportive, and I love you for that. I honestly do. But just understand, I don't have time to go through everybody's message. Please, for the love of God, don't show up at my house. That will not go good. I can promise you that. We are very Second Amendment people here in West Virginia, and it won't be good. Come see me at a gig, or if I'm at a trade show or something like that, man, by all means, come talk to me. I love to talk shop when we're in those designated times of being able to talk shop. Don't show up at a gig and talk to me while the band's on stage for 3 hours. Wait for the band breaks, wait till after sound check, and, I'll give you my undivided attention. We can sit and talk shop and do whatever it is, you want to do, as far as that's concerned. So I just needed to say that, guys, because it's just been getting crazy and out of control. And I'm sorry that took up 4 minutes of the video. I'm really not sorry, but, it is what it is. Compression. Let's talk about compression. I know. Let's see now. That would be about 8 or 10 minutes. I can see the comments already. 10 minutes into the video, JR, and you ain't even talking about compression yet. Really, dude? Really? This is your life? Are you really that bored at your keyboard that... Whatever, man. Those of you who get it, and God love you for it, So nowadays, there's a lot of conversation about parallel compression, and, it's like the new, Jim Jones Kool-Aid of the month. Let's parallel compress drums, man. If you're not parallel compressing drums, man, your drums sound like crap, and blah, 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 and all this other, it's like, dude, shut up, okay? I do not, in this scenario of my career, where I am mixing a different band every night, I'm usually in a different room or environment every night, and most of the time it's a throw and go situation. Throw it up, get it going, do the show, tear it down, put it back in the truck, and go home. There's no time to fall in love with the mix, okay? So my mix strategies are very just fundamentally based. I'm just trying to get frequency correct. I'm trying to correct for frequency of my systems, issues, because JBL has its own laundry list of issues. We joke all the time that we EQ out the JBL from our systems. And then, compression is the other thing. It's like when you get compression right, it really fattens the mix up, and it really just ties everything together. You know what I mean? But less is more in this scenario. I do parallel compress my vocals. in a subgroup. And that really brings all the backing vocals, especially if I got a band that has like 4 or 5 singers in the band and everybody can actually sing. You know, it really ties all those backing vocals together and sounds like they're singing a chord from a piano. I mean, it can be really, really good, you know, if you've got really good singers that know proper mic technique and can sing their harmony parts right and stuff like that. But I basically am compressing kick and snare, you know, fairly hard, rack toms moderately hard, without it losing its dynamics. I don't compress the drum pad. I don't compress keyboards. I don't compress electric guitars or acoustic guitars. I do compress the bass guitar, and how much I compress it is solely dependent upon the bass player's approach to the instrument, whether he's playing a quality bass and we get actually a decent sound out of the bass itself, and if his technique is correct, and you know, he's not changing basses all night, and each bass is a radically different volume. You know, some basses might be a little brighter than the other. I can handle that. That's fine. But when you have one bass that's passive and one bass that's active, you know, just play all active basses or play all passive basses. You know, pick your poison. You know, it just makes life so much easier on the sound guy. And then that goes for electric guitars too, because, you know, a lot of, man, there's a wide variety of different gain levels from one guitar to the next. You know, and understanding that, you know, the differences between a Strat and a Les Paul and a Tele and a PRS and an Ibanez, you know, really goes a long way in making you that sound guy that everybody wants to work with, you know. I was just talking in the member video about understanding the differences and the different nuances of, you know, Wurlitzer and Rhodes stuff and the stereo imaging that needs to happen there. Hammond B3, I played for decades with a Hammond B3 guy. I'm very well acclimated to what that should sound like, and how that works, how the different speeds of the Leslie work and how that affects how that sounds in the mix, you know, and that sort of thing. Electric piano, horns, synth, you know, all those things have different characteristics, you know, and working with keyboard players who understand those different characteristics and are able to get their levels correct is half the battle, you know, and that sort of thing. So I try to leave that, those keyboard companies go to great lengths to really perfect those sounds, and I rarely do much EQing on the keyboard channels, and I do no compression. But I do compress the bass, I usually step on it moderately hard, especially if they finger a lot of songs and then slap some other songs. Those are usually two different levels of gain, you know, just from the approach of the instrument. And then vocals, you know, I compress, you know, 7 to 1 at the vocals. I usually compress, you know, 6 to 8 dB, and then over in the vocal group, the parallel compression there for vocals, I compress like 4 to 1, so it's a little more gentle of a compression setting, and I'm really just trying to compress about 4 to 6 dB, just enough to tie everything together. Whatever I need to use compression for to solve any issues in the vocal channels or whatever, I will do at the channel, not in the group compression. Group compression is the icing on the cake. And then I will compress front of house like 2 to 1, and will compress about 4 to 6 dB there, just enough to shave the top off of things. I don't do any makeup gain on the house or the house compressor. If I need more oomph from the vocals in that vocal group, I will kick that output gain up about 2 dB or 2 dBu. And then in the channels, all my channel compressors for the vocal channels start at 4 dB on the makeup gain. So we start right out of the gate with that. That gives us an extra little oomph of gain right out of the gate. And you know, if you get gain structure right, you got it right on the input gain of the channel, the faders, you know, in its sweet spot, then that makes the EQ and the compressor work better too. I typically, with my wireless stuff, well, let me just say wired stuff, because most of you guys are not going to have what I have for wireless. Let's just say a wired SE Electronics V7 or a Beta 58 or a Sennheiser 945. I will probably have the input gain at 12 o'clock on the M32, and then I will start my fader at -10, and I usually like to have those vocals between -10 and 0 dB on unity on the vocal channel. That's the sweet spot I know on the M32. Now my output left right top is at unity, and my aux sub, which is the mono center output on the M32, is also at unity. And that usually gives me plenty of headroom. Plus I'm getting 4 dB boost at the compressor even before we start compressing. Of course, the idea is to compress, 4 to 6 dB, 6 to 8 dB regularly, so you need that output gain, and that makes that vocal nice and fat and nice and consistent. We're not trying to make gain corrections on the vocal channels with compression. We're really just trying to fatten it up and really kind of put it in its sonic place, and compression can really add that extra oomph and body, to things that you can't, or that I ain't saying you can't, but you would struggle a little bit to get on the EQ. It's just kind of easier to get it from the compressor. And when you got compression right, your digital mix will start sounding a little more analog. It'll never be analog, because it's not, but it will be analog-ish. It will give you a much better dynamic feel. Things will sound more natural, because look, that's the goal here. We're not recreating the mix, we're reinforcing it, so we are really just trying to take the sound that it is in its natural state. Like I had a club owner one time argue with me because he didn't like the way the guitar sounded in his live feed. And I'm like, well, that's what it sounds like coming out of the amp. So what do you want me to do with that? Well, it sounds boxy and sounds like it's, this or that or the other. And I'm like, okay, then go tell the guitar player that. I'm just reinforcing it. I'm not recreating it. I have no control over his tone. Now, I can ruin his tone with horrible EQing, but less is more in these situations. It really is. And I had to just point out to him, like, go listen to the amp. That's what it sounds like coming out of the amp. I didn't think it was boxy. I thought it was fine. I think he was just trying to find a reason to boof on me because he didn't like the fact that I brought my own start scene in, and there's some political things going on there that had nothing to do with the band or the sound or my skills or any of that stuff. This is a guy who thinks he's a sound engineer, and I've forgotten more about sound engineering than he'll ever learn in the rest of his life. But I digress. Getting back to the compression, thing, less is more, man. It just is. Don't manipulate something into something else. When you hear it coming out of front of house, it should sound like what it sounds like on stage. That acoustic guitar should sound the same coming out of your system as it does coming out of the acoustic guitar when you're standing in front of it. Same way with the electric guitar, same way with the bass, same way with the drums, same way with the vocals. If the person sings out of key without a mic, guess what? They're going to be out of key with a mic, So you got to kind of take all that stuff into consideration when you're trying to unfold this stuff and make your way through the mixing process and trying to make people happy. We all know that there's going to be people who are insecure about their playing or they're insecure about their sound, and the sound guy is going to be the target of their. If they're not playing right, well, I can't hear myself, the sound guy's fault. Or if the band doesn't sound good because they're not playing together as one, musical unit, that they're not gelling on stage like they should be, oh, it's the sound guy's fault. I had a promoter one time come to me, and one of my guys was mixing the bands, and I was actually playing that day. And he said, man, your sound guys really destroying this band, aren't they? And I'm like, no. I said, that's what that band sounds like. I made it a point to go see what this band sounds like because they were opening for us at 2 other, shows that they did in the last month. And this is what they sound like. They're horrible. They have no business even being on an event this size, but you're buddies with the drummer, and that's why they're here. So don't blame their lack of talent on my sound guy, because that's not what's going on. So there's a whole conversation to be had with that. I mean, there just really is. That has nothing to do with compression. That has nothing to do with your skill level. That has to do with the fact that you got to know when to say when. You know, you're not going to recreate the world with compression. You're not going to fix a bunch of gain issues with compression. You know, the best you can do is put a little bit of a leash on something, you know, that sort of thing. It's 100 different things that come together that make, you know, one big difference, you know. But if you approach it like, is the instrument sound natural in this, or am I manipulating it to a point that I'm turning it into something else? If that's the case, then you've kind of missed the point, you know, and you need to go back and reevaluate your mixing methodology and, you know, that sort of thing. I know a lot of guys that run mixes with way too much bottom end. They just do. They're bass junkies, and they want the kick drum at 130, 135 dB all the time, and it's just stepping all over the vocals. And the vocals are never going to cut the way they should, and never going to be on top the way they should, because you're more worried about kick, snare, and the guitars being on top, because that's what you like most about music. You know, when I mix a band, I ask myself, what do these guys sound like when they're at rehearsal? You know, sonically, that's what I want them to sound like through my rig. I'm not trying to turn them into something else. I'm trying to enhance and reinforce what they're giving me. Compression just gives you a means to be able to put a little bit of a cap on things. It gives you the ability to squish it a little bit to make it fatter on the output side. And you use gain tricks in the compressor to make that happen. If my vocals as a whole just isn't cutting through the mix as much as I want to, I go to that group compression, that parallel vocal compression, and I'll kick up that output gain 2 or 3 dB. Boom, there it is. It's right where I need it to be, you know. And then, you know, at final out, if you didn't notice, at vocal channels and at my channels, I'm 7-to-1. In the vocal subgroup, I'm at 4-to-1. At front of house, I'm at 2-to-1. The closer I get to final out, as signal flows through my console, the less I want to compress it, because I want the band to get loud when they play louder. And I want the band to get soft when they play softer. I still want the band to be dynamic. And I see a lot of guys that miss it that way, and they can way over compress, you know, the front of house mix, and then kick up that makeup gain, you know, to make up for the gain to get it loud. And then everything is just like this the whole night. The band has no dynamics whatsoever. And the band should be organic. It should be moving up and down. It should be alive. You know, it's played by human beings who are alive. The music should be alive. It should move around. It should be dynamic. Even the tempo moves back and forth inside of the meter. You know, I mean, it's just the way music is meant to be. If you're a musician, it's total elementary information there for you. But if you're coming into the production business as a DJ or as just a novice guy who's trying to learn production, that's something that you're going to have to learn. I'm a musician, have been a musician since I was 8 years old. I'll be 53 this year. So I kind of know a little bit about how a Les Paul should sound. You know, I'll know a little bit about, you know, the difference between a Ken Smith bass and, you know, a Spectre and a P bass and a jazz bass or a G&L. They all have their own characteristics. You know, the amps that they're playing through. I can't tell you how many times, and this is what I try to convey to young guys, and they miss it sometimes. I can't convey the importance of standing in a circle with a band and just listening. Shut up and just listen. Listen to them talk about their instruments, talk about their amps. And I was someone, when I was coming up in this business, I was asked a lot of questions. Like, what's the difference between a Les Paul and a Strat? Well, then the guy would tell me. Well, then as I'm listening to music, I make those mental notes. I train my ears to hear those differences. And boom, then when I go to mix a Les Paul, I'm not going to mix it like a Strat. You know, there's differences in all that, you know. The same way with keyboards. You know, a lot of different keyboards have different characteristics. You know, a Moog sounds different than a Korg. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's synth is not all created equally. Some people did synth a whole lot better than other people. So, you know, that is what it is. Many people have tried to mimic the Hammond B3. It's getting really close. I mean, really, really close. I was watching some video from NAMM this past year, and man, Hammond's got some digital organs out that are, dude, if you close your eyes, it's hard to tell, but I can still hear a difference because I spent, 2 decades of my life sitting next to the Leslie, because the Leslie always was playing it next to the drums. Why, I was playing in church with my buddy, and I just know what a Hammond is supposed to sound like. It is what it is. Can you hear the difference between, the B3, which has percussion, and a C3 that does not have percussion? The tone is the same, but the attack is different, So, those are all things that you learn over decades of working in this business, and it's not something you can put on paper and teach someone. It's something you have to develop a feel for. Compression is the exact same way. You have to develop a feel for compression so that you can feel when things need a little bit of limitation or needs to be squished a little bit to fatten up. You're manipulating, the sound. I always say we take sonic chaos and turn it into art, because I think that's what every sound guy should be doing. At least that's what you should be, striving for. And a good sound guy can take a really good band and make them sound great, because they know how to put the icing on the cake. They know how to hide the warts, and they know how to enhance the things that they do well. And they're really good with flying in all kinds of, long delay and verbs and short delays and all that stuff that really put the icing on the vocal cake, and that sort of thing. But it's probably because he's mixing a band that he doesn't have to chase the guitars around all night because the levels are different. You got to chase the keyboards around all night because the levels are different. He actually gets to play with the vocals. He actually gets to mix the vocals in their purest form. And the band is where it needs to be. Yeah, I'm going to do a solo boost here, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that here and there when the vocals aren't going. But if you really want to give your sound guy the most bang for his buck, get your drums, bass, and guitar, your rhythm section, and your keys correct so he can focus on vocals. Let's face it, most of the music that we love are based around vocals. The rhythm section is a supportive part of that process, especially if you're in, country music, R&B, vocal-driven stuff. You might get away with it in rock and roll where you just have one lead vocal and a whole bunch of, guitar. But all modern pop music is built around vocals. R&B is built around vocals. Country is built around vocals. If you don't have three-part harmonies, dude, why are you even in this business? You're not in the right business, And then you take rock bands, like especially you get into the progressive realm of rock bands, progressive rock's like Yes, where everybody's singing in the band, and that sort of thing. That brings Kansas is another one. Everybody's singing, or a bunch of guys, 3 or 4 guys are singing in the band. And you have these big 3 and 4 part harmonies all the time. Journey was another great example of that. Hey, man, vocals, everything is built around vocals. Everything is supporting the vocals. That's music 101, dude, So getting the vocals right is crucial. That's why it's so important to be, getting that right when you're in small rooms, controlling stage volume. Because if the vocals aren't on top of the mix, then what are you doing, People are not going to sit there for hours unless you're Steve Vai or Joe Satriani or Joey DiFrancesco. God rest his soul. I know he's passed away now, but you're someone who's actually good enough to captivate an audience without vocal stuff for 3 hours. These people came to listen to someone sing. You're going to have that in its proper place, and the band has got to let go of their ego in a manner to where they can support that. You can be the best guitar player, keyboard player in the world, and maybe you bring monster chops to the table. But if you're playing in a cover band, 9 times out of 10, that band is going to be built around vocals and vocal harmonies. So they have to take precedence. So the rest of the band has got to structure what they do in a manner to where it supports that, not walks all over it all night and don't care. Because everybody has their own selfish personal agenda. So there's that. Compression can really help you with that. Compression can really help you get a vocal where you need it to be. There's been times where I've had to lean into the compressor pretty hard and crank up that output gain a little bit. I try to be very subtle in those changes, because if you change it a lot, then things change a lot. And maybe you don't need it to change a lot. Maybe you just need to change things to change a little bit. Assess those things, get those things in their proper place and let compression work for you and not against you. I love you guys. I'll see you next week.